So let me introduce you to a few notices, things that are happening in crazy November, because there is lots happening in crazy November. And we thought we would start with a big summer camp youth fundraiser next Sunday. So we had high expectations for this event that have been a little bit dampened, but nonetheless, I think we can have a great Sunday together next Sunday after church, because there's a thing called the T20 World Cup Final, which might have had South Africa in it, or at least with a chance to be in it. But anyway, what we need to do is we need to raise money for our young people to go to summer camp. Summer camp is happening in December. It's the first time summer camp is happening for 3 years because of COVID, and we really would like to get as many of our teenagers there as possible. And in fact, we've booked 20 seats on the bus that we would like to fill. But these things are getting more and more expensive, and there's a cost for camp itself, and there's an even bigger cost for transport to get to camp. And it would be wonderful if we as a church could raise the money to send all our young people there. I mean, if they can pay for the camp, maybe we as a church can fundraise their transport fee, or at least most of it. So we're going to start off with a fundraising event next Sunday, and what we will do is we will have a big bake sale, fancy tea, lots of goodies to enjoy, and donations to be made, and hopefully generous donations will be able to be made, so we can raise a whole lot of money. So the young people will provide tea for us. Please come prepared to put lots of, shall I say, blue-colored notes in the plate to fundraise for that. And then if you're interested, and if you are, please, maybe you can just let me know. We can put the final on. We can watch it after church, and we can maybe have lunch together, and maybe we can buy some Boerewors rolls off the young people as well, or something like that. So I think it could be a really fun church event to do. Not quite as fun as it would have been, but nonetheless a good afternoon together. And we haven't done one of these things as HBC for quite a long time. So come along and let's get all the young people to summer camp. That's the real reason we want to have it. Okay. So, as I said, there's quite a bit happening at the moment. I'm doing them in order of events, not necessarily order of importance, although maybe that one, as the first one, is the most important at this stage. Secondly, we're having a quiet morning on Saturday, the 26th of November, between 9 and 12. It's going to be at Jane Dyer's Garden, and if you've never been to Jane Dyer's Garden, then that's an event in itself, very well worth it. Crystal will be leading, and the idea is that 3 hours of mainly quiet silence in a beautiful garden to spend time with the Lord and just kind of get yourself ready for the silly season with a bit of proper perspective. So I think that that'll be a really great event, and if you would like to go, if you could RSVP by the 22nd of November, that would be great. So looking forward to that. That's going to be a great event. Then on Sunday the 27th of November, you need to book your seats here at church, because it's going to be a great day in the life of the church. We start off in the morning with our quarterly general meeting, which doesn't always sound very exciting, but it's going to be a great meeting this year as we vote on our constitutional changes that we've been speaking about for so long, as we pass the 2023 budget with an upbeat feel about ourselves, and with voting our new elders and our deacons. So it's always a great meeting, that one, and come along for it this time. And then you can go home for a bit, but you need to come back a little bit later for our Christmas carol service, which will be at 6 o'clock on Sunday night, the 27th of November. Seems a bit crazy to have both events on the same day, but circumstances have made that the most viable option, and I think we're going to have a great carol service together. So bring friends, bring family members, bring candles, and let's celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ afresh. Sunday the 27th of November. Okay, and then our regular activities for the week. Please come tonight for a honey roast and muffins. Zara will tell you all about that if you come tonight. But her strange events on Sunday evenings have never failed. They've always been wonderful. So give us a cheer, Zara. Thank you. Come along tonight for that. And then our church prayer meeting. The first one of the month is always missions. And this week we have Dave and Mel Wright. We would have picked them for this Sunday, hey? But the Irish will be with us again on Monday evening. And they'll probably be more polite, so don't worry about that. Okay, right. And then, so don't forget, Sunday morning before church, we also have a prayer meeting at 8:30 in the lounge. And our youth activities continue on Fridays. So lots happening in the church at the moment. It's November. We can do it. We can do it. So let's do that indeed. And right. Okay. So we're in the book of Proverbs. I don't know how you found the last 2 weeks, but there's lots of information in the book of Proverbs. And sometimes we feel like it gets a bit too much, eh? Sometimes we feel like, gosh, I don't know what to do with all of this information that I have, and which ones can I kind of focus on. So I want to say to you that if you've been battling with that a little bit, then be encouraged. From next week, we're back in the Psalms with the Psalms of Ascent from 120 onwards. So that'll be a bit of a break for you if you've needed that from Proverbs. And then we're back there in a couple of weeks' time, finishing off our series on Proverbs. Today, we're going to be in chapters 17 and 18, and we're looking at the subject of wise speech. And I'm trying to get my sermon up here, and I'm told that I'm offline, which is not a good sign. Because I am online. Let's see if I can get it back. Anyway, we can can start by thinking for a moment, what is wise speech and what is foolish speech? And what struck me in reading through all these Proverbs was that there's not an awful lot to say on wise speech, but there's a great deal to be said on foolish speech. And it struck me that there's some wisdom there, because it is easy to speak like a fool, is it not? But it's not so easy to speak with great wisdom. And so let me start with a few pieces of secular wisdom about speech that I think will help us to understand where we need to be in this regard, and what we need to be thinking about when we think about wise speech. As I think I can get my sermon up now. Yes, I can. Right, that's always helpful, hey? So the first thing is an ancient Greek philosopher by the name of Publius said that I have often regretted my words, but I have never regretted my silence. You get an idea where we're going? That's a good start. So here's, I think this was in Scotland, but beneath this stone, a lump of clay, lies Arabella Young, who on the 24th of May began to hold her tongue. How many of us identify with that? Yeah, okay, hopefully not too many. Okay. A man by the name of Will Durant, who is an American philosopher who they say was known as the gentle philosopher. He said this: talk is cheap because supply always exceeds demand. Yeah. One of the lessons of history is that nothing is often a good thing to do. It is always a clever thing to say. One of Aesop's fables goes as follows. Once upon a time, a donkey found a lion's skin. He tried it on, strutted around, and frightened many animals. Soon a fox came along, and the donkey tried to scare him too. But the fox, hearing the donkey's voice, said, "If you want to terrify me, you're going to have to disguise your bray." Aesop's moral was, clothes may disguise a fool, but his words will always give him away. The Apostle James said this. He said, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. That might be the scariest quote of all, hey? Our speech can do real damage. And the thing that it does most damage to is our own hearts, because it demonstrates the real evil that is within our hearts. And so this is an important topic. If we're going to be disciples of Jesus, if we're going to be fully committed to Jesus, one of the places that we have to learn to do that is in our speech. And Proverbs has quite a bit to say about this. And I'm focusing on 17, 18, and 19 mainly. But we'll also go to the book of James, because there's a bit of help in the New Testament for us as well. But the question that we're going to try and answer today is, how can we stop being foolish and become wise with our speech? How can we stop being foolish and become wise with our speech? So I'm just going to take these Proverbs in turn. I'm not going to read them in front. I'll just read them as we get to them. But it would help if you've got your Bibles in front, and we will look at specific passages along the way. But we're kind of a bit back and forth today, so forgive me for that. But that is kind of the way it works in Proverbs. Someone said to me this week, you know, if I wrote the Proverbs down, if I put them all together, I would have put them down in themes. It would have been so much easier to do that and to read them. But somehow Proverbs kind of wants to come back at you, doesn't it, all the time? You think you've put this idea aside and it comes back to grab you again. I think there's wisdom in that too. Anyway, let's have a look at what Proverbs says about the tongue. And I want to start with Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21. I think this is such an important place to start. It says, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. It's a good warning to start us off, isn't there? Many of us grew up with the secular idiom, the secular rhyme, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt me. I want to say that the person who wrote that didn't know the book of Proverbs. Because the truth of the matter is that injuries caused by sticks and stones can largely be repaired, can't they? I mean, ask Graham. He always seems to fall on stones, particularly, hey, with that bicycle of yours, and somehow you're back on your bicycle a few months later. Generally speaking, they can all be repaired. But injuries that are caused by words can be catastrophic, and sometimes there is no return. Over 60 young people attended Zara's talk on mental illness last Friday. Over 60 people. Now, some of them were there because it was Friday night, and on Friday night they go to youth, and that was where youth was. So that's true. But others came specifically for this because it's an issue in their lives. And they were so grateful for an opportunity to talk about it. Was reading some articles this week and came across one that looked at suicide rates over the last 10 years amongst different age groups. And it wasn't quite the information that I expected to see. But one of the things that stood out for me was that in the last 10 years, the only age group category where suicide is going up is amongst teenagers. It is from a slightly lower level than with the others, but nonetheless, it's going up. So don't be fooled. The tongue literally does have the power of life and death. Let's have a look at how the fool uses his words, because there's so much in Proverbs about this. Firstly, let's have a look at, sorry, it's a bit small, but if you can't read that, you need glasses, you know. But you can read it in your Bible. Julie's saying, no ways. I've got glasses on, but I still can't read it. Fair enough. Read it in your Bible. Whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. Mocking the poor, gloating over disaster. You think to yourself, who on earth would do such a thing? Why would you do that? But have you thought about how you respond when you are at a sports game amongst a big crowd and there's somebody who gets injured and they happen to be in the other team? Have you heard yourself in situations like that? Have you listened to what people say when they're in demonstrations and how they speak about other people? There's a lot to be said about peer pressure. There's a lot to be said about the danger of crowds and how we do things in those situations that we completely regret later. How we say things when we're put under pressure that we think to ourselves later, how on earth did I come to say that? Proverbs tell us that this kind of mocking, this kind of gloating is not a mistake. It's not a joke. It's not something you can just put aside. It's serious. Because when you do such things, you show contempt for God, and it will not go unpunished. Sometimes we don't take our words very seriously. We say, I said it, but I didn't mean it. One of the things about our words is that we can't take them back, can we? Sometimes if we write an email, before we send it, we can delete it. But once we've sent it, it's done, and it's there, and you can't take it back, can you? We can never take our words back. And so we might think that they weren't serious, but the Lord does. The Lord does. Secondly, starting a quarrel, chapter 17, verse 14. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. One of the common ways we use our words is to argue with people. In many ways, we're encouraged to do that, to debate, to discuss, and we encourage people to express their views and to even express a different opinion with somebody. Quarreling is quite a common practice when you disagree with someone. But don't you find this quite interesting, how Proverbs is so strong in saying, think twice before you start such a thing. Think twice before you start it. Because you could breach a dam, and when that dam has been breached, you don't know where the water's going to go. I mean, you don't need to tell us that in KZN, right? How many dams have been breached in the last year or so through all the water that has fallen? And water just goes wherever it wants, and it causes unparalleled damage. Well, Proverbs says, so does quarreling. So be careful. Be careful. It has a similar danger. Thirdly, chapter 18 and verse 2. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. This is the first time that we actually come across the word fool in Proverbs. I think it's been behind the previous Proverbs that we've read, but here it is stated explicitly. And if we have ears to hear, we might feel that this is a little bit close to the bone, right? Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinion. Most of us have strong opinions, don't we? We know what we think and we know what we believe, and we hold to those things quite strongly. And sometimes we don't want people to confuse our opinions with facts. Very few of us are truly open to understanding the other view and the actions and understandings of other people, to actually understand them and to take their position into account. That's quite a rare thing. This has become, I think, an increasing problem with the rise of social media in the last few years, because everybody has an opinion and everyone has courage to express their opinion behind the safety of their computer screen. And it becomes easier and easier to only listen to people who have the same views as you, and to just discount or avoid, or what do you call it? Cancel those who have opinions different to you. And so we can become very good at making sure we only hear what we want to hear, and we don't take other people's opinions into account. And actually, this is becoming quite a huge thing in our world, to the extent where some people are starting to say, what is the role of media in all of this? What is the role of media in terms of determining what people think and what people believe? And there was a movie that came out a few years ago. It wasn't a great movie, but it had an interesting title, and it presented an interesting theme. It was called Wag the Dog. And it was the idea that these news reporters became so desperate that their ideas became published that they started to create the news that they were supposed to be reporting on. So not only do we report on the news, but if the news isn't quite what we want it to say, we create news to say what we want to say, and so we wag the dog instead of the tail. And it became, it's an interesting thought that often happens in our world today. If we have no interest in understanding other people's views, just want to air our own opinions, Proverbs says we are fools. Do we have ears to listen? Chapter 18, verses 6 to 8. The lips of fools bring them strife, and their mouths invite a beating. The mouths of fools are their undoing, and their lips are a snare to their very lives. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the innermost parts. Every now and again, Proverbs comes up with a saying or a way of putting it that just is so memorable, it grabs your attention. And that third one is such a thing. Hey, the idea that gossip is like a choice morsel. Oh, it is, isn't it? Oh, how we love gossip, how we identify with that, how our desire is just, we get some information, we just have to tell it to other people. We have to pass it on. And if you have it, there's this thing within you that says, I've got to share it, I've got to speak, I've got to gossip, I've got to tell everybody else what I'm doing because I have this choice morsel and I've got to share it. It takes considerable power not to do so, doesn't it? It happened to me this week. I heard something that I should not have heard this week about Nikki's school, and I desperately wanted to tell her. Oh, I can't tell you how desperately I wanted to tell her. It kind of rolled around in my mind all week. Should I tell her? When should I tell her? How should I tell her? Oh, and then I thought to myself, but actually you shouldn't know this. It's her school, it's not yours. And this information is pertinent to her, not to you. There's a reason she doesn't know it yet, and you shouldn't know it. And so everything within my powers just wanted to speak. And I somehow managed to pass the test of self-discipline and not tell her till Friday. She told me, look what's happened. I can't believe it, David. Look what's happened. And I said, yeah, I know. I know. Oh, man. And then it just poured out of me, all that I knew and how I knew it. It was so exciting to be able to tell her. It was quite ridiculous. It has nothing to do with you. Yeah. The mouths of fools bring them strife. It is their undoing. It invites a beating. You don't have to say it, so don't. You don't have to be the person who can never keep a confidence. Chapter 18, verse 13. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. This is the wisdom of God, is it not? We have 2 ears, we have 1 mouth, and that's about the correct proportion. Twice as much listening, half as much speaking. If we were to only do that, oh man, we would be in such a better place. If we don't listen and just answer as we think, well, that's just foolish. Yet I think, if I think about meetings, when we're sitting around a table having a meeting, how often, I have something that I want to say and contribute to the discussion, and I'm just itching for that gap in what somebody else is saying, to say what I want to say, that I'm actually not listening to what they say. at all. I could care less what they're saying. I want to say what I want to say. And how often is that the case, that we're not really listening? We just want to speak. One of the great tricks that I've been taught about in counseling, and I think this is particularly in marriage counseling, is called the hanky. Have you ever come across this? It's a remarkably frustrating tool. So you bring a hanky with you, and you give it. If you've got two people that are in conflict with each other and they need to sort something out, you give one of them the hanky. And you say, right, if you've got the hanky in your hand, you can speak. And if you don't, you can't. Oh, man, we want that hanky. And how difficult it is when we don't have it. We need to listen to Proverbs. It's not only foolishness, it's shameful. Chapter 19, verses 5 and verses 9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will not go free. Let me say that again. Sorry, I said it badly. A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will not go free. And then, a couple of verses later in verse 9, a false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will perish. These are pretty much identical proverbs, aren't they? And within such a few short verses of each other, Proverbs is wanting us to emphasize them. These are important words. A false witness will not go unpunished. A liar will perish. But we live in a world where lying seems to happen at the drop of a hat. In fact, I am told that in the legal system, you know, when a witness comes to the front and swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help them God, everybody in that room is assuming that they are lying. And the job of a judge is to determine which lies were less. I mean, that's disastrous, isn't it? How can society flourish when that is how things are operating? Lies are to a penny, and everyone seems to think that they will get you out of trouble. Proverbs says they'll get you into trouble. So stop speaking them. May the Lord help us to see this folly and this evil for what it is, and that we would become people of the truth. So there's a lot to be said about folly and foolishness when it comes to the way we speak. You might be wondering, is there any wisdom for us in Proverbs as to how we use our words? And the answer is, it's a lot less, but there is some wisdom about wise speaking. And so let's turn there now. Firstly, we are told that wise words are honest words. That goes against, well, it speaks to what we've just spoken about, does it not? Proverbs 16 verse 13 says that kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. May we find a way to be countercultural and different to the world with regard to this. Honest lips are rare, but they are wise and they are golden, and they are what the Lord requires of us. I mean, it's not for nothing that this is one of the 10 commandments, isn't it? Can we speak the truth? Can we do it? Honesty is the best policy. It might get you into trouble initially. It'll get you out of trouble way more times. Secondly, and this comes back to where we were at the beginning, wise words are few. And this is another one of those classic proverbs, which I've kept for now, and it's just a profound one. It's chapter 17, verse 28. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Thirdly, wise words are calm. The very previous verse, chapter 17, verse 27, says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." Man, we see that in meetings, don't we? When things are getting a bit tense, when things are getting a bit difficult, there's often somebody in the room who just brings a calm, peaceful, helpful word that helps us to go forward. Such wisdom in that person. Everyone else is panicking. but they were able to keep calm. And then fourthly, wise words are apt. Chapter 15 and verse 23. A person finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. You know, silence is not always the right thing. It often is. Generally speaking, if you don't know what to do, saying nothing is perfect. It is right. But every now and again, God will give you something to say that will bring real help to a situation, resolution to a conflict, help when everyone's in disarray. And that word is a wise word. May God give us the ability to speak with that kind of wisdom, because it makes such a difference to so many people's lives. As I said earlier, speech is a very big part of our lives. I read, Google, I think, told me that everybody speaks around 7,000 words a day. I mean, I don't know if Google's trustworthy in the exact amount, but that's a lot of words, eh? They say some people speak a lot more, not many speak a lot less. 7,000 words. And so words are very much part of our lives, very much part of who we are and what we do. And yet we mess it up so often, don't we? The Apostle James, I've quoted already, but he speaks about the tongue in devastating ways. James chapter 3, the early verses, he speaks about it as a restless evil full of deadly poison. Who can tame the tongue? It's this part of us that is small, seemingly insignificant, but yet all powerful, all destructive, and always out of control. And so how can we bring some wisdom in this? How can we go from being fools in our speech to being wise? How can we be people who learn from the Word of God and actually put it into practice with the way we use our speech? I think there's some wisdom in James chapter 3. I'm going to read from verse 13. I don't have this one on the screen, so if you've got your Bibles, turn there. James chapter 3, verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So how can we become more godly with our words? How can we be the kind of people God wants us to be? I think 2 lessons, maybe a third, from James chapter 3. And the first one is this: humility. Humility. It is difficult to control our tongue. Sometimes it feels like impossible. But actually, if you take a step back and think about it, the reason why we so want to speak is because we think that we have something to say. We think that we have knowledge or wisdom or insight or whatever it is that people need to hear. And we want to pass on that wisdom to other people, whether or not they want to hear it. I remember watching Stephen playing cricket the one time, and one of his friends got out, and I could just see exactly why it had happened. So I went up to him and said, "Can I tell you why you got out?" And he said, "No, I don't want to know." I said, "Well, I want to tell you anyway, so I'm going to." I don't think he listened at all, and I don't blame him. Because actually, that's our problem, is that we think we have things to say that people need to hear. And the way to deal with our tongues, to get us out of trouble so very often, is to just have a little bit of humility. C.S. Lewis has the best definition of humility, because sometimes we get it wrong. We think to be humble is to think less of myself. But that's not humility. Humility is to think of myself less. So just stop thinking about what you are thinking about and what you need to tell everybody else. and start thinking about other people and what they are saying. And maybe you can learn from that. Secondly, if you want to use your tongue in a wise way, become a peacemaker. A peacemaker. Everybody wants peace. Everybody wants to live peaceful lives. Everybody thinks that peace is a good idea. But how many of us actually make peace with the way we live our lives? How many of us use our words in a way that diffuses difficult situations? Or how often do we use them that just explode difficult situations? Peacemaking is the way to go about it. And I was just thinking about this, where can I start? I can probably start in my car. Those words that I'm not scared to put out there because nobody else can hear them, although people can lip read quite well. When things happen in my car, just, make the situation worse. Be a peacemaker. Step back. Step into a situation to help a situation, not to hurt a situation. Think twice before you speak. Remember that there's a lot of wisdom in just not speaking. That can really help. And so peacemaking, if you're not going to make peace with what you say, don't say it. Keep quiet. That'll help us quite a bit. And then the third thing that I thought, and I think this really does connect us with where we're going to conclude the service around the Lord's table, is the importance of forgiveness. The importance of forgiveness. Often we say and do things that are wrong. Often we say and do things that hurt other people. And if we can ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness, then, we can make the world a better place. We can help things out. One of the things I say to couples before they get married, I read them from Ephesians chapter 5, which says, "Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church." And then I say to them, how did Christ love the church? He loved the church by sacrificing himself, by dying for us. I say, husbands, that's what you've got to do. And then I say to wives, be careful, because however good your husband is, he's not Jesus. And so he will need a bit of forgiveness every now and again. Can you give it to him? Can you give it to him? If we can forgive with our words, sometimes we can make the place a better world. And of course that's the case, because that's what Jesus did, isn't it? We spent our whole lives offending God. We've hardly spoken about that today. We spend most of our lives offending God by living our lives our own way without any reference to him at all. We do our own thing when he calls us to live for him. And how did God respond to that? He sent his son, who died on a cross to bring about our forgiveness. And on the cross, as he hung there, experiencing the most agony, most evil, the most injustice that the world has ever seen, what does he say? He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." That's wisdom, and that's what we are asked to do.